This is part 3 of Chapter 20, Unavoidable Fate, from a story called The Time-Dilated Generations, by Esteban Gallardo. Following the assigned duty roster, Grace Lambert took her position at the navigational controls of VY Canis Majori spaceship on the 7th day after the Wolf Rayet 124 catastrophe. She had always been a pillar of strength, a woman who had spent 55 years proving her resilience, her talent, her unwavering control over both machine and mind. She was extraordinarily talented. She was not only exceptional as a pilot, but also had demonstrated remarkable skills as a computer systems programmer. She had contributed to the very security systems that safeguarded the generational spaceship, designing protective measures intended to endure for centuries. She had been trusted, respected, and admired. But on that day, there was a storm inside her. A storm that no firewall, no security protocol, no reinforced bulkhead could hold back. She hid it well. As an exceptional pilot, she was specially trained to handle extreme situations with calm. As she entered the control cabin, there was no sign of the devastation within. No one could have guessed that, only days ago, her world had ended. That her husband and only son, her entire family, had been among those who had taken their lives. That life that she had built, the future she had fought for, had been reduced to nothing. Harold Cross, her co-pilot and longtime friend, was already seated when she arrived. He had known her for years, had shared long shifts with her, had trusted her with his life in the most delicate moments of navigation. And yet, today, he saw something in her eyes that unsettled him. "Grace, I'm terribly sorry for your loss," he said gently, his voice low, careful. "I think the administration would understand if you needed time to grieve. I can request a transfer for you. There's no need for you to be here right now. What you need is rest. There's a support group that—" "Harold," she interrupted him with a quiet, measured voice. It was not cold, nor dismissive, but firm. "I appreciate your concern, truly, but right now focusing on my job helps me. So please, don't." Harold hesitated, studying her expression, searching for some hint of what lay beneath the surface, but all he found was composure. "All right," he said at last, though the worry did not leave his face. "But if you need anything at all, you have my support." Grace nodded in silent acknowledgement and took her seat. Without hesitation, she began running the standard protocols, verifying the status of the spaceship propulsion systems. She moved with precision, her hands steady, her posture controlled. To anyone watching, she was exactly as she had always been. For several hours, silence hung between them. Harold chose not to speak, not wanting to say something that might shatter whatever fragile peace she had constructed for herself. But within her, the storm was no longer just a storm. It had become a vortex, a spiraling force pulling her further and further away from the world of the living. When Harold finally excused himself to use the bathroom, he hesitated before leaving. He turned back toward her, saw the faint, almost serene smile on her lips, and perhaps against his better judgment, took it as reassurance that she was still holding together. The moment the door closed behind him, Grace's fingers danced across the controls. Her first action was to lock the cabin door. The security systems were robust, designed to prevent unauthorized access to critical systems. But Grace was not an outsider. She had written parts of those systems herself. She bypassed every protocol with ease of someone who knew precisely where the cracks in the armor lay. Her target was the speed regulation system for the ship's offloading inertial quantum mass drive. It was, by design, impenetrable to external threats. The failsafes had been crafted over centuries to ensure that no rogue external actor could compromise them. But Grace was no rogue external actor. She was inside the system. Within moments, she had full control. She composed a message, carefully worded, following the exact procedures required for an emergency deceleration protocol. The alert spread instantly throughout the ship, reaching every passenger. The notification was clear and unquestionable. Obstacle detected ahead. Immediate deceleration required. Panic did not set in. They had prepared for this. In the 552 years since the spaceship had left Earth's orbit, the automatic collision detection system had been activated only 3 times. But every passenger aboard had undergone mandatory drills every decade. They knew what to do. One by one, they secured themselves into the nearest available acceleration seats. The liquid suspension system, an improved perfluorocarbon compound, was injected into their lungs, saturating their bodies with oxygen-rich fluid that would allow them to endure the crushing forces ahead. An early version of that same compound had been used centuries before, when John Anderson had first left Earth to begin humanity's great exodus. There was no fear, only preparation. No one inside VY Canis Majoris realized that when the G-forces pressed down upon their bodies, it was not because the ship was slowing down. It was because it was speeding up. The only ones who noticed were those aboard the other generational ships still traveling across the Milky Way. As they monitored their networked companion, they watched in confusion and horror as VY Canis Majoris began to accelerate beyond all reason. There was an alarm no one had ever expected to hear outside of a training simulation, an alarm so deeply embedded in the protocols of spacefaring civilization that it existed only as a theoretical failsafe, a specter of disaster lurking in the darkest corners of human imagination. It was the 99% light speed threshold alarm, a warning meant to signal a point of no return. The warning was clear. Every single person who had trained aboard a generational ship knew what it meant. They had studied it, rehearsed it, played it in simulations. But those were just drills, practiced in the safe confines of controlled environments. No one had ever truly faced this moment before. And yet, the alarm was real. It rang across the entire network of generational ships, spreading through the vast, time-dilated web that linked the last remnants of humanity across the Milky Way. A wave of dread settled over the millions who received the signal, a paralyzing horror that gripped them all in unison. Something had gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. The network administrator's first instinct was to establish a direct communication link with the VY Canis Majoris navigational command control. They sent distress calls and attempted to direct connections, but to no avail. Silence. There was no response. It was not merely an absence of reply. It was a void, an eerie nothingness where voices, data streams, and acknowledgments should have been. It was as if the ship had been completely severed from the network. Panic spread. Decisions had to be made fast. There was only one course of action left. In the entire 552-year history of humanity's great exodus, there had been one protocol that was never meant to be used, a measure so extreme, so unthinkable, that its very mention was almost taboo. It was the remote control seizure. Under only the most catastrophic condition, the network had the ability to assume full remote control of any generational spaceship. It had been designed as an absolute last resort, an intervention so dire that activating it was equivalent to declaring a total failure of command on the target vessel. No ship had ever suffered such a fate. Until now. The administrators acted swiftly, overriding every ethical debate, every legal precedent. It didn't matter anymore. If VY Canis Majoris continued accelerating, the outcome was inevitable. A ship traveling at such impossible speeds could not survive even the smallest collision. A single rogue pebble in its path could unleash horrors beyond imagination. The ship was racing toward annihilation, and every second lost increased the probability of disaster exponentially. The override command was issued. The control request was sent. And then, something happened that should not have been possible. The request was denied. It wasn't a system failure. It wasn't an error in transmission. It was a deliberate rejection, as if someone, somewhere aboard VY Canis Majoris, had locked them out. The network administrators stared at their screens in disbelief. There was no precedent for this. The override could not be refused. It had been designed with absolute authority, above all individual command structures. No one had the power to reject it. But the conclusion was clear. They had no way to control the spaceship. That was part 3 of Chapter 20, Unavoidable Fate, from a story called The Time-Dilated Generations, by Esteban Gallardo. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next time.